so strange up here. Wow, okay. Well, I know you, some of us may know you, but for those watching online or those being here, just give us a little bio about you guys, your name, whatever, tell us a little bit about you.
Cool, so my name's Christian. How many of you that at least are in this room, this is your first semester at Northwest too? Awesome, that's fantastic. Awesome. Well, welcome to Chapel, even though it's a different format. Just welcome here. Yeah, so my name's Christian. I came to Northwest in 2010 as a student and did my undergrad and master's work. And then afterwards, I joined the team on campus ministry staff alongside Pastor Phil here and have been serving at Northwest for the last 7 years on staff. And I was a student leader before that. So I've been here for that amount of time. And then Pastor Phil was actually my campus pastor. And so him and I have been good friends for the last 10 years and basically just family. And so that's me.
Cool. So little background. I guess my the history with Northwest started as a student, actually. And so some people may not know that. Started here in the 80s as a student. I know I don't look that old. Anyway, so bad joke. So that's been my background. I've had 13 family members actually attend Northwest in one way, shape, or form. So very connected. My first time I actually walked into this chapel, I was 7 years old, and I had an uncle that lived down the street. Came to visit him and walked onto campus just to check it out when I was a kid with my parents, and walked into this place when I was little, and then came to school here. Came on staff officially in 2001, and been here ever since, so I'm in my 20th year. And it's been an incredible journey, and one that I would not trade for the world. So, a little background.
No, that's awesome. Well, let's just dive into the questions. So first question, we do have a lot of newer students here at Northwest. So what's one piece of advice that you would give someone brand new to the NU community?
You want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
I guess my first piece of advice would be don't hold back. Jump in with both feet and look for a place to be involved. I think one of the things people do, especially when they first get here, is they spend so much time looking and considering and trying to figure out their place that before they know it, the semester or the school year is nearly gone. And then they realize, oh, wait, I actually didn't engage in as many relationships as I wanted to, and I didn't find a place to jump in. And now I'm wondering, where is this community that I've heard so much about? And so don't wait, because really, I think it's upon each and every one of us to make that community. Northwest is known for community, and we are one. We're in a little bit of a funny season, but we make up that community. You make up that community. So your initiative is important for all of us.
Yeah, I think I'd say, I often hear stories about from people saying, like, everybody here seems perfect, or everybody here is from the same Christian faith background, or everybody here comes from a wealthy family, or everybody, and I would just say, don't assume people's stories. I think it actually stops us from being in good relationship with one another, and I have the bad habit of just looking at a person and writing a narrative about who they are and where they came from and what their journey's like, and I just think one of the best things you could ever do is just look at a person and assume you know nothing about them, and then just get to know who they actually are and their story and their journey. I just hear that so much, everybody's this, and I'm like, yo, if you only knew who people are, where they come from,
so true.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I feel like we can also flip that question. So what's one piece of advice you would give someone returning back to an NU campus? Because this year's so different from last year. So what piece of advice would you give them?
I think I'd probably say, maybe it's because what I have to do for myself, so suffer with me. I would say just be open. I think, we talk as Christians about God's doing a new thing, God, would you do this? And then when anything changes, we're like, God, why have you abandoned us, And I just think Jesus is so often in the discomfort, and he's so often in the new spaces. I think of Jeremiah 29:11, which we often quote, I know the plans I have for you, but verses after that, God said, this is a group of people who are in captivity. They're like in a very uncomfortable situation. And it's in that space that God says, I have good plans for you while you're in a situation that you don't really want to be in. And that it wasn't of your own making in so many ways. So I think Jeremiah 29 is like what I would tell people. Like it says like build cities, don't have kids, but build cities, unless you know you're married. But it's like build cities, have kids, like lay down roots even though the season's uncomfortable.
I think one thing I would just encourage people is to be really careful about the narrative that we make up in our own mind. Yeah. And I think sometimes we observe things or maybe even experience things. Maybe somebody hurt you, a roommate said something in the past. You're coming back with, I don't know, something that is just maybe not exactly the way that you hoped it to be. Don't be afraid to ask a why question. My new favorite question is what if. I like asking what if questions, and I've been asking that what if. But I think the why question is another question that we really need to ask. And there's always a story. Make sure that you have the right story in your mind and in your head, and don't let that story in your head become one that's so negative that it turns your life into a very depressing sort of narrative, because that can easily go that direction, especially kind of in this crazy world that we're living in right now. Everything is a little bit strange for everybody. And so we ask, why is that happening? Or why are we making that? Why did that decision? Well, there's always an answer. It may not be exactly the one you would arrive at, or but there's always good answers to the questions. Don't be afraid to ask why.
That's awesome. I love that. Don't be afraid to ask why. Well, with that being said, our students are sending in some amazing questions. And one of the first questions I'd love to ask you guys is, when you were in college and just feeling overwhelmed with school and studies, lack of money, missing home, etc., what did you do to get yourself out of that mindset?
Oof. I guess should I go first since I was in college more recently?
Yeah, I was going to say, man, you're taking me back a ways.
Well, you just did your doctoral, so you were stressed.
I could speak to that.
You could probably start, actually, yeah.
Well, no, you start. I prefer you.
Wow, mindset. One thing I'm doing right now in my own life, and I haven't been good about it, but Brenda actually, Phil's wife, if you don't know her, she's awesome. But Brenda does this all the time.
She is awesome.
And good job. I was setting you up.
I'm not going to pass
that
moment.
you up. But one thing Brenda does, Brenda is just such an encourager. And she's very realistic, but she works hard to use encouraging words. And so about a year ago, I started doing this on my birthday, where every year on my birthday now, I'll post a picture, of course, of myself on Instagram, and then say like, hey, would you text me an encouragement about me, something you've seen in my character, and a way that you could just encourage me. And I screenshot all of those. And the reason I say that, at first I felt like weird and narcissistic, but then I was like, you know what? I need to be encouraged, and I need to be okay with asking people to like see me and like push me forward and call out the good things in me. And so I would just say, while it doesn't get rid of any of the stress, I would tell you two things. One, have people who just speak life to you and like ask for it. Don't wait for it to come to you. Like have friends who are like, yo, tell me how awesome I am. Like encourage me. And then two, I think remember that this is just a season. So like you can do anything for a short period of time. You can do hard things for a short period of time. And college is hard, but you can do it.
Yeah.
I think I would just add to that very quickly. I think in a physiological way, we need endorphins. One of the things that I think that produces happy endorphins or positive endorphins in our life is a regular workout exercise routine, even if it was a quick walk. This morning was a tight window for Brenda and I. We got up just a few minutes earlier, and it was just 1.5 mile walk. It was not much, but it was enough to set us up, kind of tee us up for the day. It's not the normal workout that we usually do, but it was enough to get us going so that we felt like we had a positive outlook on the day. The other thing, and speaking of Brendan, I'll just say this. I'll throw this out, and this may come up later in another conversation that I'm having later or a talk, but one thing Brenda has started to do since you mentioned her, and I give her full credit for this, she's a very positive person. I give this to you. Think about this. She's a very positive person, and she absolutely believes, and I agree with her. This has been a conversation we've had going on now for probably a couple of months, that God's favor is
yeah.
on your life.
Yeah.
God favors you. When you are a child of God, he looks at you as a child, as a father or a mother would look at their child and say, you're beautiful, I favor you. And when you believe that, you lean into that. And every day, matter of fact, she started a list back in August, and it's a running list every single day. And the question we'll ask, and we did it this morning. How did God display His favor on you today? And we think about that, and we find moments in the day, and then she writes it down. And we've got this incredible list. We remember back, and it's easy to forget if you don't write it down. It's easy to forget. True. And so we'll go through that list now that is several weeks long, and we go, oh, remember that? God, oh, that's incredible. And it's been really a cool moment just to keep our minds in the right mindset as we go through a very stressful, kind of overwhelming season.
You both talked a lot about community and a lot of aspects of really connecting with just like the importance of community and the importance of affirmations. A lot of our students feel disengaged with how our community is with the learning environment. I think a lot of times it's like our students feel very disengaged with the modality of learning and just the relationships that they are lacking right now, but also the relationships they're lacking with the connection of church. So what would you speak on that? How can students get connected to a church? How can students get connected in relationship and find those people that can encourage them in this next season?
Well, let's be honest, relationships right now are going to take an extra effort. It's just the reality of it, you guys. It's just the reality. Relationships are going to be harder now than ever, and you've got to reach down inside of you. A lot of times we use the excuse, well, I'm not a people person. I'm not, whatever. And the reality is, I believe that a lot of times that is just a simple excuse to not have to work hard at relationships. Right. That's true. I think God has created us people. You know what I'm saying? He created us for relationship. He created us for community. That's the hard part of the situation that we're in, is that our communities are being pulled apart, which means that we have to work extra hard, I believe, at being the kind of people that God created us to be. Right. And so going that extra mile. And if it means finding a church, maybe they're all virtual churches, etc. right now. I just encourage, take that extra step to do that. Lean into the family groups that you have right now. Maybe there's a family group or group of people on your floor that are observing church together. Lean into that and do the view together. Do those kinds of things. We are receiving some videos from churches in the area that we will be promoting. Just to give you an idea, if you're new to the NU community and you're new to the area, we're going to be showing you some churches that we would think are great churches for you to attend. Those are still to come. So if you're looking for some, we're going to help you with that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just plug that same thing. On Northwest U Devo, you can actually go to it now, and we have already lists of churches based on distance and like website links. And then on top of that, we'll be adding videos where the church pastors are going to be welcoming, saying, hey, my name's Pastor so-and-so. If you'd like to get to know our church, so you can put a face to a church. Other thing I'd say, which is just a plug, but is cruise is something we're doing this semester, which is just 2, 3, 4 people that are like your crew, your group of people who you're walking in life with. And while even with like church, one of the best things that you can do these days, I think, is like text somebody and say, hey, what'd you think of the service? And don't just talk about like, I liked worship or I liked the preaching or whatever, but like actually engage with the content and go like, this is what God's doing in my life.
Awesome. Well, talking about engagement, we're going to do a little 360 on our questions.
Okay.
Some of our students are asking, what would you say our NU community can intentionally prioritize doing this school year to aid in the fight against racial injustice in our community and in our world?
Whew. Oh, let's do it. Let's go. No, I respect it. There's no bad questions to ask. I think, everyone's at a different place. So the hard thing to say is, what can we do as an NU community? I think we have to start by looking at us individually and doing the work. For some people, I think that means like learning and starting from scratch. I think that means showing civility to one another. If you know, I think I can easily get frustrated with people who aren't empathetic, but I think I have to slow down enough to say, like, this person is brand new to this conversation, and so me giving space for people to like learn and to grow. So I'll just do one more plug first is if you're new to the conversation on justice and specifically race and wanting to learn more about that, we have another page on Northwest U Devo app or website, whatever, that's all dedicated to resources on race and justice. So we have different books, podcasts, movies, articles, anything that you'd like to read or watch or listen to. I know Mosaic is, I think they're going through the book Build the Bridge, and if I'm wrong, someone text me. Campus Men this past summer, we did Color of Compromise. We're also offering credit this semester for people to read through Compassion and Conviction by Jamar Tisby. Anyway, so I'd say like, on an individual level, we could start by just learning and growing. Behind the scenes, and then Phil, please go for it. I can tell you that over the summer, I was on a committee of NU employees and faculty who were just talking about this very issue of what are some steps we can take. And so I can tell you, like about a month ago, the faculty were all given an FAQ that was just on how do we serve students of color better. That even like helped define basic terms around race and justice. That talked about named problems that have happened in the classroom that we weren't aware of. That could have been like a microaggression that like, but maybe someone wasn't aware that that's what was happening. And so that's just a small step. That's not everything, but I think one thing Northwest is doing and needs to continue to do is just like growing and how we even relate in the classroom.
You hit on almost anything and everything I would really ever say. I just would like to emphasize, I think, to that question, the wrong thing to do is nothing.
Yeah.
And the best thing to do is the thing that you're most comfortable with. And if that means in this season in your life becoming aware because you grew up in an environment that maybe didn't allow you to be aware or didn't push you to learn, then in this season maybe allow that to be the thing that you're doing. Because I think that's significant. That's significant. Push yourself in this awareness process to reach out to even somebody in our own community that maybe doesn't come from the same cultural background, right, doesn't necessarily look like you, maybe wouldn't be a person that you would naturally or normally sort of engage with just because it doesn't feel comfortable. Take a step and force yourself into an uncomfortable moment to learn something from them. Right. And be, as Christian said, empathetic in that process. I think that's a big step in the right direction. Empathetic. I'm learning so much. Reading and listening. I will say, and Christian and I have had a 10-year really best friend relationship. Yeah. There's regular times, and you tell me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm saying, but I have leaned into him as a friend and given him full permission in my life just because there's things I'm not aware of to help me become aware. And I've said to him, Christian, if there's ever anything that I say, anything that I ever do, would you please correct me? Just because I want to be more aware, I want to learn. And so, lean into some of those relationships. Do something.
Niharika, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you guys hit it on the nail. I think it's so easy for our world to blame ourselves and blame what we're doing rather than blame others. But Philip completely said it, where it's you have to be empathetic towards certain situations and certain stories, and at the end of the day you can't really blame yourself, and you can't blame others. You really just have to hear others out. And so it's definitely something that people need to be empathetic about, and people just need to be open. So with that being said, I think with that whole concept too, I can be the first to say I'm struggling with my relationship with God because of everything happening in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of our students feel that too. So what should you do when God feels so distant?
What do you do when God feels distant? Do you want to?
That's a really tough question, and it's one that I don't know that we'll ever solve. There's moments in my life, and I've been serving Jesus. I came to the Lord 49 years ago, okay? There are often seasons where God doesn't feel as close as I'd like him to, and then there's moments where I'm like, Jesus and I are we are skipping down the path together, and we're, it's just awesome. And I think in those moments when it doesn't feel, because we want those warm fuzzies, I think that's what we want to feel all the time. But it's in the moment that I don't feel that I have to lean into trust.
Right.
And I've learned trust in the times where I felt him close.
Right.
And so in the times that I felt him close and the things that I was doing in the season that I felt him close, I need to keep doing in the season that I don't feel him close, in order to make sure that I feel him close again. And I'll trust that moment will come again. I think it's human nature. Even if you think about your close friends or your parents or, whatever. I grew up in a great home, but there was moments where I didn't feel as close to my parents, even as much as I know they loved me all the time. And there's seasons where I didn't think that they were calling me enough, or, they didn't. I was like, do they really care? And again, the narrative in my head starts going crazy, and we start that same narrative with God, I think, a lot of times. And God hasn't changed. God doesn't move. God is the same. God is consistent.
Right,
Most of the time, really, we have to own our own feeling, and it's us maybe that doesn't feel. But we are the ones feeling not close to God. God hasn't moved. Right. So keep doing the things that built trust in the first place. That would be my response.
I think, first of all, God is not my feelings, and God is not my feelings of God. Those aren't the same things, And so I would start there. I have to remind myself, me feeling God is not the same thing as God's closeness. Often, when I feel distant from God, that's all. It actually is sometimes an indication that He's so close. I read this poem a couple years ago that said, "Silence is not absence; it's attentive presence." And sometimes, the closest God is when He doesn't say anything, and He's just watching you and loving you and standing with you. So I would say, one, don't mistake silence and the lack of feelings for the same thing as nearness. God is near. I think what Phil said is so true, being willing to say, to stay in the rhythms that keep me close to Jesus, even if I don't feel it. But I just to hit on Niharika, I've had a lot of friends like what you said, where you're I'm looking at the world right now, or looking at our cities and our country, and all these things just feel so empty of God. And what is God up to? I've read through the story of Joseph so many times this year, and I just keep remembering that when I look at Joseph's life, I've been asking, what is God up to? Yeah. And it's interesting that, Joseph goes to the pit, but it's not because, whose fault is it? Well, Joseph was kind of, arrogant. He's a punk. Let's just own it. Joseph was a punk at first. He's, loud-mouthing off to his siblings, yo, you're going to bow to me? Yeah, I'd throw my brother in the pit, too. And and then his brothers are jealous, but then at the same time, there's this daddy issue about a favorite kid. What put Joseph in the pit? All of that, Yeah. Was it God? No. What put Joseph in the pit later? His obedience to not sleep with someone who wasn't his wife. And I just think it's funny that Joseph's stories, there are all these things where Joseph keeps getting put in these weird positions, and none of them are really God's fault. Yeah. And what's interesting that at the end of Joseph's life, though, he goes, God was with me the whole time, and He was working behind the scenes, making things happen. So I would just say, for those of you feeling God, where are you in all of this? One, I think God is a God who weeps with those who weep, and I don't think God is distant to your pain and your questions. He's not absent from them. Two, I don't think everything is God, but I know this to be true, that God works all things together for good. And so just learning to trust that God is going to work this thing out, even if I don't understand it, and I will see Him on the other side of it, and He's seeing me through it, I think is so important.
Yeah, no, that's good. I know our students can say they trust Jesus. I know every morning I'll go, God, I trust you with this day, and I trust you with this week. But I think sometimes our heart is so heavy that we feel like our relationship with Jesus is on the back burner. So what are some practical steps our students can take when their heart feels heavy to grow their relationship in God?
This sounds so... and you might disagree with this, so this will be interesting. But I don't think, there's certain things that I always stick to, but I've also realized that with the spiritual life, I think there's different things that help in different seasons. So I used to always be like, read a chapter a day and then spend a few minutes in prayer. But it's almost like working out. Like there's different things that reading the Bible will do for my spirit that in different seasons I need different things. So in some seasons I just need to read the Bible and then just like pray. But in other seasons I actually needed to like only read one verse and just think about it. I hope if that makes sense. Basically what I'm saying is I think being aware that different seasons you might need different things for your spiritual life. So maybe one season where you needed to spend tons of time just in taking the scripture, maybe another season you just need to take one verse and that's all you read that whole week, but you just keep saying it to yourself all week long. Maybe a different week you need to like just worship in your room or like get around people. So it sounds weird, but I think not always doing the same thing in your spiritual life and seeing what the needs are in that season and like meeting those specific needs rather than just, it'd be like going to the gym every day and only like bench pressing and going like, why are my legs so small? Like some seasons they just need different things. It's like, yeah, you need to work on them glutes. So I would just say
that's
like,
what
do
my
different
problem
things.
is.
Oh, I've seen you on the
I
treadmill,
gotta start
Phil.
working on my legs. No, I don't disagree with you at all. Matter of fact, for about a month in the summer, I actually didn't read the Bible. I actually read a book. And it was because I needed somebody else's perspective on a certain issue, and their perspective was really feeding my spirit. There was scripture all through the book, but the book really became my devotional time. And then not long ago, then I switched back to a daily Bible reading plan. But I took a little break from that, and it was really helpful. I don't disagree with you at all. Actually, I totally agree with what you just said, in my opinion, yeah.
But it's about doing something.
Something,
and realizing like, what do I need now, and just doing
Yeah,
something.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, you guys, now that we're kind of winding down with our questions, we're going to do a rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask a question, and you have 1 to 2 sentences to, say your answer.
Okay, no
you guys
pressure.
did talk about spiritual growth and like the practical ways you do it. And so how do you grow? Like what's your like daily disciplines of how do you grow spiritually?
Yeah, so for me, 1 or 2 sentences. Every morning includes some sort of physical exercise, and during that exercise, it's prayer time and mostly a devotional time or reading a scripture, something that's feeding me from the Word. And whether that's from a book, like I just said, or directly out of scripture, or the combination of both, that is the fuel for my soul.
I do Bible before phone, Bible before bed. So like when I wake up, I have a chair in my room and I just sit in my chair and I'm just quiet for like a couple minutes. And I just stare at the window and like wake up. And then afterwards I just like, oh God, thanks you're here. And then I read the Bible for a little bit, pray for a little bit, and then I go work out. And then at night I do the same thing. Just sit in my chair at the end of the day, think about my day, talk to God a little bit about it, maybe read a scripture and then go to bed.
Awesome. Okay. How much time does it take to prep a sermon? Ooh.
Ooh, good question. Go ahead.
You guys could probably answer that. You're like, he didn't seem like he took enough time. I need a lot of time right now, but I'm new to preaching. I've only been doing it for a few years, and there's a lot of Bible to learn. So I have to take a good amount of time, but it's also to study and feel like I've really studied well. But sometimes you don't got it, and you just gotta put it together and go for it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of all of that. I think it depends on what you actually call time. I've got a couple of weeks from now, I'm speaking in chapel. I started a couple of days ago, and it really was, I went up to my office, told Brenda I was going to go start thinking about what I'm going to be speaking on coming up in a couple of weeks. And honestly, it was just that it wasn't time in reading a book or Bible even. It was just, I just sat and just thought and just jotted and just, okay, God, what are you speaking to? What's on our students' hearts? I don't want to miss this moment. Right. So, and then it goes into, scriptures and thoughts and stories. And I mean, so it could be, weeks to come up with a message. I know pastors that are planning 6 months out on a topic, and so you got to get it into your heart, into your spirit before you can preach it, before it can make sense to anybody else. So it's hard to quantify that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, next question. What's the hardest thing about pastoral ministry? Maybe it's sermon prep, but you know.
You know, I think that changed. I think the hardest thing for me, the thing I have to, in this season of my life, two things I think the hardest is one, and maybe it's a positive, separating my identity from what I do. I constantly have to remind myself, like, I'm not a pastor, I get to pastor. Like, I kind of go, like, pastor is a verb. That's not my identity. Like, I'm God's son, and pastoring is, like, something I get to do. And so probably the hardest thing for me, especially when I feel like I'm doing a good job, like, it's easy to be like, this isn't my identity when everyone's, like, pissed at something you said. But when it's, like, you're doing a good job and you feel, like, loved and needed by people, it's easy for, like, those desires of that feeling of, like, someone needs me, and, like, that can become an idol in my own life. So just kind of be honest, like, I have to constantly work to, like, disassociate who I am from the thing that I do, even though I love y'all and I love what I get to do.
You know, there's a few things that are difficult. I mean, coming back to the sermon thing in a practical sense, sometimes those are hard because you don't want to miss the moment.
Right.
But I think the thing that is the hardest for me personally, and this is just being very, very vulnerable here, is feeling the pain for people.
Right.
I was on a Zoom call with a pastor friend the other day, and he was talking about the number of people, students right now in his, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Whoa, didn't expect that. Just a second. He was talking about the number of young people in his, that's under his leadership that have had thoughts of suicide, and that he's struggling through that. And it hit me, the weight that he's carrying. And with all of the issues that we're dealing with in our culture and our society, and where young people are living at today, doing school at home and home environments, students that are being abused at home, questions that are going on in people's, so he was, the numbers and the statistics that he was giving me was staggering, and I haven't left that moment when he told me. So it's just been, so the pain I think you carry.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for your vulnerability. Yeah, wow. Well, with that also being said, I think a lot of students, because they're going through these own mental thoughts, these own world, just thoughts that they're having, they can't hear from God. So are they doing something wrong? Or do they, it's a valid question of, God, I can't hear you. So am I wrong? Like, what am I doing? So what would you answer to a student that's thinking that way?
Oh, man, when I can't hear God, first of all, you're not alone in that feeling. So I would just start there. Like, I understand that feeling. I know Phil, I know we've talked about even the last couple of years, moments like, God, what are you doing? And why aren't you saying anything? And like asking, seeking, knocking, doing everything, every Bible verse backwards and forwards. And you're just like, why do I get silence? And I think for me, I think 9 times out of 10, you're not doing anything wrong. I think often, like, that's maturity. Like, God often matures us in the silence. Silence, again, is not absence of presence. Even if it's quiet, God's near. And I think often God, like, brings us into maturity. And I'll just share a story from my life in this last moment. 2 years ago, or like a year and a half ago, I was engaged, and that ended. And during that whole process, and Phil was a part of that too, talking, and for months, it was like a 3-month process of ending this engagement. And I was just like, me and my ex-fiance were just asking God and every counselor and pastor and friend in this, like, God, what are you up to? What's going on? Like, what's happening? And even that, and again, a year later, when I'm processing, then considering moving, and now that season of my life, and I just felt like in both situations, God was so quiet. And when I tell you how frustrating that was, and like how disheartening that was, when I'm like, God, I'm trying to do the right thing, and you're not telling me what to do, and you can go, am I doing something wrong? And a friend of mine, he recommended this book to me about hearing God's voice, and I remember reading it, and one thing the book said that just is stuck in my heart is that often we want to use God's voice as a scapegoat. And he's just like, God does speak, and he does give us answers sometimes. But sometimes what we want is we want the prophetic voice of God, the audible go left or go right. Because if God says go left, if God says go right, then no one can be mad at me because God told me to do it. And all of a sudden, what we don't really want God's voice. We want an excuse. We want our comfort, and we want, we do want God's voice, but part of us wants to be comfortable. We want no one to be mad. We want these sort of things. And I know from my own life, God was going, Christian, what do you want? What do you desire? What do you want to do together? And God actually wanted to partner with me, not just tell me what to do. And I think in our maturity, what we'll come to find is that as we grow in Christ, we become the sort of people who learn how to make good decisions with God, and who God comes alongside and walks us through our decisions, not only tells us what to do. And so I would just encourage you, that's not for every situation. There's so many things where I'm still like, God, what do you want? And God's like, boy, you better go left. And I'm like, whoop. But I'll just say, first of all, that question sounds like a pain, and I'm just like, I'm sorry for the feeling that comes with, like, God, where are you and what are you doing? But no, again, God is so near, and I think what God's trying to do is mature you into a person who can actually make good decisions and walk in life with him. And that thing that Phil just talked about is trust. And it takes, okay, God, I think this is what we're doing, and I'm going to step out. And if I could just bring comfort, and I'm talking too long, but I just want to say, you cannot mess up God's plan. You're not that strong, you're not that good, you're not that sovereign, you're not that smart, you're not that broken to mess up God's ability to work things out for good. And so I would just say, take the pressure off of yourself and put trust in Jesus and going man, I know even as David prayed, even if I go to the gates of hell, there you are with me. And I think that brings us comfort.
Wow. Well, thank you guys. If you're in this room or if you're watching online, can we give it up for our two pastors? Wow.
One more thing real quick, sorry. Just because before we go, give a little heads up and kind of info for our community.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So most of you are aware that Christian is taking a new assignment. And so I'm always about, talking about things very openly and making sure that people have a very clear understanding of where we're at in this process. And this has been a journey that Christians has been on for about a year, probably.
Yeah, a little more. Mm-hmm.
And he's accepted a position down in Portland. And I have mixed emotions about the whole process because, number one, he's one of my most trusted friends on the planet. Let me just start there. Beyond our working relationship, our friendship is deep. And so, saying goodbye in terms of close working relationship is difficult for me. But on the other hand, an incredible excitement because he's stepping into what God really called him to do and brought him to Northwest to study 10 years ago, and now to be able to see him take that step and see God work in his life and make this move down to Portland and go on to an incredible staff. John Mark Comer is an incredible pastor down there, and he's going to be joining their team down in Portland. And I've joked a little bit, but I'm kind of serious about it. The truth is, Portland needs a leader like Christian right now. And so, I honestly think that there's going to be some incredible things. Who knows? He might be the mayor of Portland. Lord knows they need a mayor too. So, I'm not making any political statements. I just think he's incredible. He is an incredible leader, one of the best that I've ever known. And so he's stepping out of the position here. His last day actually will be the 18th, Friday the 18th, and then he's going to be moving down to Portland. But he won't be a stranger to Northwest. We're going to bring him back and have him speaking in chapel and very engaged. And then we're going to have a little season where we're trying to sort of figure out what that next piece looks like. We'll probably start an interview process in November, depending on the approval process. And there's an approval process here at Northwest in terms of anybody that's hired, and budgeting and prioritization process. We got to look at all of that, and there's a number of things considered. And then we'll start that process once the approval is done, somewhere in November-ish, in hopes that we'll have a plan in January. So in the meantime, I'm going to step into some huge shoes that he has created. And the reality is, if you haven't noticed, I'm not Christian. So, I don't have the gift mix that he has. He's an incredible communicator. He is a trusted friend. He's an incredible musician, incredible worship. The list could go on and on if you know him at all. It's very intimidating, actually, for me to even try to fill this position temporarily for a little bit of a season of time. Not only that, but we don't look at all alike. So just in case you're wondering, we don't look like each other either. But all that to say, I'm being funny. All that to say is that we're going to do this for a few months until we have kind of some clarity. It's still going to be good. Things are going to be great.
It'll be good.
We've got great people. Niharika's here and others, staff members that are going to be doing some great things, and we're in great shape. Great student leaders, great staff in the campus ministry office, people that are stepping up and doing some really awesome things, and we're believing God's just going to continue to do great things on our campus, and we're confident about that. So.
And just to say, Pastor Phil is my campus pastor, and I think the best thing that we could do right now is have a person who has lived life, been faithful to Jesus, been faithful to his wife and his kids and now grandkids. I couldn't say enough that Phil is such a man of high character, someone who I deeply trust, someone who's like a mentor and a pastor to me. And so I couldn't be more happy that our campus gets a man of this high character, reputation. I've traveled all over the country leading worship and speaking, and anytime anyone knows that I know Phil, only praise and admiration comes out of the mouth about Phil and his wife Brenda. And so, family, I know some of you don't know him, but I can tell you this is a man that I deeply respect and trust. He's a person who I would say follow him as he follows Jesus. And so I think Northwest is in such good hands. Couldn't be better hands. And so there's good things ahead.
You're very kind.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And also, thank you to our students who sent in questions. If you have more questions, guess what? We'll be doing this next chapel as well. So feel free to tune in Omega Chapel.
A few moments later.
Some of the people in the room and some of the students watching online may know who you guys are, but some of them might not know. So give us a little bio, your name, your favorite season, who you are, how'd you get to this stage? So
favorite season. Okay, that sounds great. How many of you, by the way, in the room it's your first semester at Northwest? Fantastic. Hey, well, welcome home, family. It's good to see you. Even with masks on, it's cool to be together. So my name's Christian. My favorite season, I like being warm. So whether that means wearing a coat or flying to San Diego or being in Seattle in the summer, that's whatever. That's my favorite season's being warm. But I came to Northwest 10 years ago, so came as a student, did my undergrad and my grad work here, and then was a student leader under Pastor Phil, who was the campus pastor then, and after that, we decided to hire me on. He decided to hire me on, and I've been serving at Northwest for the past few years as a campus pastor here, and it's just been a joy. So that's kind of it. I'm a pretty simple person.
Awesome. You are more than a simple person, that's for sure. And it's been a joy to have Christian on board. Favorite season for me, I am definitely a summer. I love summer. So I share with Christian, I love warmth. I like to be warm, but I like the warmth of the sun. But more than that, I like summer because I'm a big avid water sport fan. Love to ski. Water ski is my jam. I like to golf, and that is also a great summer thing to do. So the season is summertime. Northwest, had a long history with Northwest. Actually, first time I walked into this chapel, I was about 7 years old, and that is 49 years ago. And I had an uncle that lived down the street, and came onto this campus with my family, walking through the campus. And I remember as a little kid walking into this chapel, just checking it out as we were on a walk through campus. I've had 13 family members attend here through the years. Did my undergrad here back in the 80s, and came on staff in 2001. I'm in my 20th year serving right now as a vice president for church relations and spiritual formation campus ministry, and I oversee the wellness center as well. But that's kind of my role here on campus. So.
That's awesome. Well, I know that we have a bunch of new students on campus, new students in this room, new students watching online. What is one piece of advice you would give someone new to our NU community?
I would say for a new person, I think I would tell you to, I always hear this every semester. Someone will come up to me and say, hey, Christian, like, everybody seems this way. Like, everybody seems like they all came from, like, a really Pentecostal background, or everyone's family is super rich from Northwest except mine, or everybody came from this or that. And I would just tell you to not assume people's stories. You just don't know, like, everybody says that, and then everyone thinks no one's like them. And then you come to find out, like, oh, actually, there's a lot of people who come from a lot of different places with a lot of stories. And so I would encourage everyone, but especially if you're new, one, you're not alone here. There's probably someone who has a similar story to you, even if they don't look like you. But also to just be open-minded, like, come to a person and just assume nothing about them except good, and let them tell you their story themselves. So I would just, get to know people for who they are and don't assume anything about people.
That's really well said. I think I would say lean into the situation that you have here. Don't wait assuming that things are just going to come your way. Make things happen. If relationships aren't forming the way that you'd like them to, go out of your way to be a friend to somebody. The best way to make friendship is to be a friend. And Northwest, you've heard this, is I think one of the greatest things about Northwest is our community, our friendship. Obviously, community looks a little bit different. Be patient in this environment that we're currently experiencing, but lean in and really be the friend that you want somebody else to be to you. Does that make sense? Lean into that.
Yeah, we can flip that question around for those returning back on campus. What would you tell a returning student that's coming back?
Here's just a bit of advice, I think, for right now, and students that are coming back. There's a lot of questions that people have, I think, and I think a lot of people assume things that maybe, I don't know, are or aren't true. I think a lot of times we make up things in our own minds, our own narrative. We listen to our own narrative the most, and so sometimes a story that maybe is a perspective that you have or somebody else has that they shared with you now becomes your reality. And I just think it would be really important. One of my very favorite questions to ask is why. Another one is what if. I like asking that question, what if, because I think it makes a dream and dreams us forward, moves us forward. But why? And there's maybe questions that you have or things that you need to understand. If you're returning and things are a little bit different than what you've experienced in the past, ask somebody. Ask a why question. It's okay to ask a why question and find an answer. And that's what we're about. As we live in community, everybody's a learner here. I am one. I'm learning from you. And Christian has taught me more things in his time with us working together, just in terms of relationship. Ask why. Ask why. Ask why.
I think right now I'm just learning to stay open-handed and be detached in some ways of like how things are and the way things are going. I've, as a person who's followed Jesus for a long time, how many of us have like been in the church service or been around and someone's like, God, would you do something? God, would you move? God, would you do a new thing? And then as soon as like anything changes, we're like, God, why have you abandoned us? And so I just think like be open to God doing good things and new things, even through difficult things. And so I just say like stay open. God is not dead, nor is he ignorant of our world and what's happening. And actually, like, I just really believe that God can do good things even in uncomfortable seasons.
Yeah, I love that. Phil, I loved when you said ask why. Our students are asking now. When you see what I did there. Why,
Way to go.
Why do we enforce lifestyle policy so heavily?
Ooh.
Big one.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You can go first.
Why do we enforce lifestyle policies so heavily? Man, there's a long question. There's a long answer to that. I think it goes back to who we are and what we're trying to do here. Obviously education is what we're delivering, but as a Christian university, the ultimate goal here is really to form disciples of Jesus.
Yep.
And, within that context, these lifestyle standards, you might call them lifestyle standards, but they parallel Scripture. In everything that we do, we try to real hard to make sure that we parallel Scripture. So, it's developing a community with lifestyle standards that would be, what would be expected in a Christian community living together to raise up disciples that are truly following Jesus, followers of Christ, and walking in that path the best way possible. If we can lay a foundation of that, what that looks like here at this stage in life for people as you're studying and learning to learn also to be people of character and people of integrity, people that love, people that respect one another and show kindness to one another, people that have the fruit of the Spirit, a part of their life and part of their character, the way they live that out. When you leave here, obviously the hope would be that would be the foundation that the rest of your life would be built on.
I'd say a couple of things. One, none of our lifestyle policies as a community, again, I think we call it like a community agreement. Like, this is what we're agreeing to live together for this season. So first of all, these aren't saying, one, none of these things are salvific. And if you ask any person that works at Northwest, not one of them will tell you following the community standards are a way to get to Jesus. They don't make you, they don't get you closer to God. They're not determining upon your salvation. And so I think we have to take that off of it, first of all. These aren't statements about how to get saved and how to be a good Christian. These are, what are we agreeing to? How are we going to live together? What are we choosing to do to live together? The second thing is, I'll just poke at the question just for a second, and I do it with love. The question also assumes that communities don't have lifestyle policies, but every community that you're in has assumed lifestyle values. And so you don't have a friendship in which you don't assume behavior. Right? Like, every friendship, like, if they do certain things, you're like, no, we're not cool. Like, we're not going to be friends. We know that more now in 2020 than ever before. And so I would just say, like, you don't have any form of community that does not have a set of agreed upon values. And when those are broken, the community typically breaks apart. So I just would say, like, every community has written or unwritten guidelines for how we want to live together. And Northwest isn't unique in that. We just have you sign them.
Yep.
So good. Good job, Christian.
With lifestyle, we have a testimony saying, I want to be a good disciple and commit to following Jesus, but I'm struggling to let go of the lifestyle choices I make that are holding me back or interfering with Christianity. Any advice for surrendering and lifting up my mistakes to God?
Such a nice question.
I would just encourage anybody that's feeling that way. Sanctification is really a process. I mean, we're saved when we accept Jesus into our heart and our life. We know for sure that work is immediate, that he does for us. Our place in eternity is secure when that happens, and we know we're heading to heaven, when we accept Jesus. But the working out of that process, that's a process, the sanctification. I mean, after all of these years, I have to continually renew my devotion to Christ. I stay in the Word. Why? Because the self of me gets in the way. The desires, take over sometimes. I say something that I didn't mean to say, or whatever the case may be. And I've got to kind of die to that all the time. That's the process. So don't beat yourself up on that, really. Don't feel the pressure on that. Recognize the enemy is constantly going to be at work at your flesh, and that's a daily exercise, an ongoing life process. We don't arrive there until we get that incredible opportunity to stand in front of Jesus and we hear those words, "Well done," And I'm looking forward to that one day. But man, in the meantime, all of us are on that same path, and nobody in this room judges anybody else. At least I hope you don't. I certainly don't, because we're all there. We are all one moment away from a dumb mistake.
I think there's so many things about like sanctification and changing that are important, right? Like one, I think it's a matter of trust. Like, Jesus, do I trust what you have to say? Do I trust that like the way you want me to live is the way to a good life? So a lot of times, like, and let's just name it, like if you're dealing with pornography, like a lot of pornography is coping and like how we deal with hurt and how we deal with feeling like loss and abandonment, whatever. And that's one thing. But a lot of it too is like, Jesus, do I trust that like what you're saying about my sexuality is true, and it's actually the way to a good life? And a lot of times, like with temptation, part of it is like, oh man, deep down I don't actually trust Jesus. And I think that's an okay place to start, to go like, you know what, Jesus, I don't trust you in this area. Like, Jesus is not afraid of that space. He's not afraid of that question. And then you kind of go like, okay, Jesus, what is it like to trust you here? Does this really lead to life? Again, sanctification is not what gets you saved. Changing does not get you saved. But I'll say one other thing that I learned, I wish I would have learned earlier, but I think in some circles we say change and sanctification, becoming like Jesus, is some circles say it's all on you. Like, you have to do it, work hard, try hard. And then like other circles of Christian church will say like it's all on God. And I think it's neither. I think it's both. It's like we are partners with God. So God won't do it without you, but you can't do it by yourself. But God does the heavy lifting. And so I think like we participate and say like, okay, Jesus, what does this look like? And then like we realize that God does the heavy lifting, but we still have work. And I'll just end with this because I could talk too much, but like Christianity is not opposed to working, it's opposed to earning. And so like you don't earn anything from Jesus, but you do got to work on some stuff.
Yeah, so speaking on Jesus, how do you stay woke on the current world issues of the world, and how are you able to filter it through Jesus' eyes and not your own?
Woo.
Hello.
Let's just go. How do you stay woke on the current issues of the world, and how do you filter it through Jesus' eyes? Do you want to go first, or?
How do I stay woke? You mean aware? So, I mean,
Woke equals aware.
It's almost impossible to not be aware. Everywhere you look, and anybody you talk to has an opinion. So, I'm very careful. As I process, especially news sources, I'll go there first. As I process news sources, I do my best to listen to both conservative and liberal sides of stories, because I want to hear from, this is just me, I want to know where people are coming from. I want to know what they're saying. And I'll have conversations with people on both sides of the issues that are going on. And I want to be able to engage with them. I don't want them to look at me and stereotype me in some way that they can't actually have a conversation. So I'm very aware. At least I try to be. I try to be very aware of where people are coming from, because I want to know. And then honestly, it's difficult to filter. It really is. It's difficult to know, especially in this crazy day that we're dealing with. We're coming up to an election, and there's a lot of tension around that. There's a lot more tension even to come. It's difficult, and so I do my best to align issues with Scripture the best I possibly can in my own heart, my own mind, my own spirit. That's where I want to fall. I also recognize that leaders and people that we have in place are not perfect people. They're not even biblical people in terms of Bible believing. A lot of times they don't operate according to the fruit of the Spirit. I have to expect that, and so I can't expect them to operate in such a way that would look like that. So I give some grace and I give some space there, but I spend a lot of time in prayer and praying for people in leadership. I think that's very biblical for us to do that, whether we agree with them or not. We need to pray for them, and we need to evaluate a lot of the things that we're looking at, things that are happening around us, and people and issues that are coming our way in alignment with what the Bible says, and do our best to make judgment calls based on that.
Can you ask the question one more time? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, how do you stay woke on the current world issues, and how do you see it through Jesus' eyes?
Yeah, I do. So I only read the news. I don't watch it. That's just, I don't have time to, and I like reading more than. So I have like 2 different news sources that I just get an email for every day. So that's just what I do, with lots of links to like research more if I want. So that's how I stay aware of what's happening. I stay woke, I guess. And then I think though, how do you keep Jesus in the middle of all that? One, I think, can I just talk like as an American for a moment, if that's cool? No? Okay. I think as Americans, we have to be careful of like marrying ourselves to a party. No, I'll just say it, and I guess I'm out of here in 2 weeks, so I can say what I want. I think, like, in the church, we've seen Christians marry conservatism. We've seen Christians marry progressivism. Neither are the kingdom of God. Neither are the way to life. Both of them have things that are Jesus-y. Both of them have things that are, like, just not Jesus-y. And so I think we have to be very careful about nationalism and, like, just marrying faith with a country. Because Jesus is a lot bigger than America, and he's going to outlast it, and he's going to rule other nations, not just ours. And the church prevails. Anyway, I'm done. So I think one, like starting there, like America is not my end all be all, like the kingdom of God is, and Jesus is my king, regardless of who's the leader of any country, and regardless of good times or bad. Like I have to live into the way of Jesus. Some days that means following the nation, and other days it means walking the opposite way. So I think. I would just say one thing a friend told me recently, and maybe this is too like edgy, but he was just like, if you can't just, he was just talking about progressivism and conservatism, and he just said, if you can't, as a Christian, if you can't name at least like a couple things that the other side of that coin probably does that's more Jesus-y or cares about that's more Jesus-y, you may be too committed to a party. And I was like, oh shoot, like I need to check myself real quick. So I think there's things we can do to like guard our hearts from love and loyalty to any form of party or nation, because Jesus is who deserves our love, our trust, and our loyalty.
Yeah, wow. I think, Christian, you started touching on this, but speaking on world issues and current world issues, what do you think about the BLM movement, and how do you think Christians should respond to it?
Let's go for it.
We're doing it. We're getting real.
We're going for it. I think with Black Lives Matter, I have a mask that says it, so whatever. I think with Black Lives Matter, I think everyone should be able to understand the sentiment I hear the 2 things I really hear, right, is like, I hear like, I completely hate it. I hear like, yeah, I get the idea of Black Lives Matter. And then I hear, well, we like it, but I disagree with an organization, or I'm totally for the organization. There's like a really wide spectrum. If you don't know, Black Lives Matter is both started as an idea, as saying an ideology that was leading to protests, and then has also become an organization. I think Christians can and should engage with empathy, should engage with anything that's about things about the kingdom, especially about justice. And then I think, again, as Christians, we don't marry organizations, we don't marry politics, we don't marry parties, we don't marry groups. And so like we name the things that are good and that are Jesus-y about an organization or institution, and then the things that we're like, wow, maybe that's not in Jesus' view for humanity, we're willing to name those things. And then I think that's where we need wisdom to go, okay, how do I engage in a way with an organization that may or may not have things that are and are not aligned with Jesus' vision? Yeah. And I think what it takes is humility and wisdom to go, I can see the good in something, and if there's things that I disagree with, I can name those things. I'll shut up in a moment. I just think probably one of the hardest things about this right now is that the world feels very all or nothing. It's like you're completely for every part of something or not. And I'm like, can I be a human being who's more nuanced than just like all or nothing? Can I be for some parts of some things and against some things? Can I be that complex? Yeah. And I think the question that I hear under that is like a hurt of like the complexity of Black Lives Matter. Yeah. There's like an organization that some Christians are like, hey, I'm not for every part of the organization, and I can, and I, as a follower of Jesus, can thoughtfully respect that person and engage with that person and not villainize the person. But big picture, Black Lives Matter as an ideology of saying, like, people in our country matter, African Americans matter, people who have been lived under the subjugation of injustice for the whole time they have been in this country, they matter. I think we can start there and go and be okay with that much.
I would absolutely agree with what you're saying. If you were saying are Black people important by saying Black people or Black Lives Matter, I would absolutely say, from an ideological standpoint, Black people are incredibly important, and even more so right now. From a philosophical standpoint, we have got to lean into that issue. This summer, reading The Color Compromise, I appreciated a statement that he said in there, and it caught my attention, that people are leaning oftentimes into the idea of Black Lives Matter because there's not another option. Yeah. And I was out golfing actually with an African-American friend of mine, pastor friend, and I asked him, tell me what your perspective of Black Lives Matter. It was kind of funny, his response actually caught me off guard because he just about came out of his golf shoes in response. And he said, I wish people would get behind other organizations. And I said, well, tell me one. He said, you'd be better off to get behind the National Association of Colored People. That would be a great organization because it would really, if you want to send support to something, if you want to support the issue, do that one. He said, I understand why people are supporting Black Lives Matter from a philosophical standpoint, but when you understand what Christian was just saying, the organizational side, that's where it gets really blurry because we aren't for Marxism and we're not for the families falling apart and we're not for some of the things that they have definitely, I'm not going to go down the list, but that they are definitely organizationally behind. We don't want to support that, but are Black people really important? They are absolutely important, and especially in this day and age that we're living in, they are extremely important, and we need to make an extra effort to make sure people know that. Yeah. So that would be my response.
And if I could just add one more thing to that, I think what we have to do again as people is be willing to even disagree. So there's got to be, out of everybody in this room and watching this, there's someone going, oh, I disagree with what Phil just said or Christian just said. And to be, at the end of the day, people who are like, I disagree with you, but I can hear what you're saying, and at the very least, still respect a person's civility, their humanity, and the different decisions that they make. I think the best way we can engage, and I know we're taking forever on this, but I think the best way we can engage is by making decisions thoughtfully. And if you come to the end of a decision thinking through different pieces, willing to listen to other perspectives and thoughtfully make a decision, then wow, that's super commendable and respectable. And the truth is I might change my mind in a few years. I might change my mind next week. And so we're changing and growing as people.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that both your responses were through the filter of empathy, and I think sometimes it's so easy for us to forget the power of empathy and the power of what it takes to just step into someone's shoes and really feel what they're feeling. But with that, I think comes a lot of heaviness in our heart and heaviness with our relationship with God because we're wrestling with the ideas of the world. So how do you know God is still there and with you even when you don't feel Him?
I'd say that God is not a feeling. And I just I have to remember that. My feelings of God and my sensory data of God, when I feel God, that's incredible. And that's such a gift. That's so beautiful and sweet. But God is not limited to my feelings. He's not limited to my thoughts. God is closer than the very breath we breathe. He's just not a feeling. So part of what we have to do is in those moments, remember that just God's not a feeling. The other thing I'd say is that when I don't feel God and when He seems distant, the silence of God is not the absence of God. And we have to not confuse God's silence. Sometimes His silence is actually a sign of His nearness. Don't you have friends who you can be super close to and not say, you can just hang out and not say anything with, yet you just feel each other you're close. And I think God wants that sort of relationship with us where we don't always have to depend on a feeling to know that He's there, to actually just get to know a person. He's man, God doesn't have to make me feel. He's not like a vending machine of feelings, And so I would say that, there was a poem that I read a couple years ago that just said, remember that silence is not absence, it's attentive presence. And that's often how God relates to us. And I think in maturing, as God matures us, sometimes He actually removes some of His voice so that we can learn to know Him even without the feelings and sometimes without the noise, but just get to know the fact that He's there.
Yeah. I think I would add to that because that's such an incredible thing you just said. But in addition, did this mic go on? Okay. In addition to that, I think the factor of trust, we've got to hold on to the fact that we trust that God is there. You go back to the moment where you felt that presence, your relationship was established with God, and you have to trust that relationship hasn't changed even in the time where you don't feel like He's present in the here and the now. You've got to trust that. It's the same. So Christian and I are good friends. We don't have ongoing regular contact 24 hours a day, but I trust that he's the same person, even though I'm not speaking to him, in an hour from now, we're not hanging out in the same room. I trust that he's the same person. He's still but so I can lean into that and trust that based on the previous relationship that I had. And so, I think trust trust is a big factor in this relationship with God. You may not feel him in the moment, trust that he's the same. He hasn't changed. Sometimes it's us. It's as in our human error and the way that we go through life. Sometimes we are the ones that actually have changed a bit. God hasn't. So.
No, that's so good. So with all those in-depth questions, it's actually a rapid fire round for you guys. So we have a couple just questions that can be answered in depth, but you only have 2 to 3 sentences to answer those questions. So, make sure you count your words. So first question, what's your nighttime skincare routine? The people want to know.
My nighttime skincare, is that what you asked?
Yeah. Just a secret.
I actually have one now. One of my friends got me on one.
I'm waiting to hear it.
I'm like, I got some face washes, some with the cleansing beads.
This could be something new I'm going to learn from you.
Now you gotta get rid of all the dirt. That's what I'm told. So you use the face washes and the cloths, and then you put some lotion on at the end to make sure it gets the good moisture, because you don't want to have an ashy face. So.
There you go.
And all my people of color said amen.
Wise words.
Yeah. So soap and water and a little wash the day off. That works.
Yep. So good.
That's fantastic.
So good. Another question. What's your daily devotion time look like in the morning or at night?
So for me, my wife and I have a regular morning routine, and I would say probably 80% of the time we do this. It starts out with exercise in some way, shape, or form. This morning it was shortened, just to be honest, because I had a very early morning meeting, and so we only got out. We walked for about 1.5 miles. Usually it's a little bit longer than that, and then we work out a little bit. But during that time, it's a prayer together, and then we do separate devotions, whether it's actually in Scripture or a book, something that that's feeding our spirit. And so I combine my exercise routine a lot of times with prayer and reading. If I'm on a treadmill for sure, then it's even easier to engage in some reading, Bible or book, or a little combination of both.
Yep.
I have a chair in my room. I sit in it for a few minutes, just quietly, and just don't read, don't pray, don't anything, just think and start the day and realize Jesus is with me. And then I'll normally read my Bible for a little bit and then talk to Jesus about my day. And then at the end of the day, I'll just sit in that chair again, read my Bible for a few minutes, just talk to Jesus. I do Bible before phone, Bible before bed. That's my thing.
So good. Okay. Why do y'all say community so much? What's the importance of community?
That's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting. We do say community
The word
a lot.
community.
That's who we want to be. We want to be family and community and close. So, why do we say it? Because that's a goal that we want to have. We're kind of almost casting vision, saying that's who we want to be.
I can tell you why I say it. A number of years ago, I asked students their favorite thing about Northwest University before the term community was being used here. And it was a little personal survey that I did. And I'm not saying I started this, so don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying why I use the term. Survey I did among students, I was actually kind of going through a rough season here, and I needed to find out some things. I was on a personal journey, and the common answer to that question, things that students really appreciated and loved about Northwest, and over and over and over, that term was used: community, community, community. And so that's why I lean into that term, because it really came more from students. It wasn't something that I generated or that I even know other people generated. It actually came from students that they appreciate about Northwest.
Awesome. Well, for our students that haven't really gotten the full term of community or haven't really felt community just yet, what is one practical step they can take to feel connected in community? Said that 3 times.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't have something. So one practical step, just take 10 steps outside, turn around and find the first person you see and like ask them their name. I mean, it sounds, but like I think so many times we don't. We just are like so concerned about how we're coming across and like if they're gonna like us and are we cool or whatever. I'm like, yo, just like ask someone their name and like give them the little elbow because that's what we do in COVID and like and just
Fist
like
bump.
yeah, do whatever you can do and that's it. Like I don't know. I just think like go for it. Be awkward. Who cares?
You know, I absolutely, and the unfortunate thing, and I feel terrible about it, that this is an unusual time that we're living in because it just the whole mass as I look out upon you guys here and see masks across the room, that in and of itself is just so anti-Northwest University. You know, it's just not us. At the same time, I appreciate the fact that we are taking these measures to keep us safe because it means we care about each other, and the fact that you put a mask on and you're distance 6 feet apart means that you're caring. That is community, is that we love each other, we care for each other, and I think that's really important. But the thing I think that is really important is be the friend that you want a friend to be. Right. And so because we have these things, you know, these barriers now that we have to live with that I feel terrible about, it does mean that we have to go maybe to the next level. We have to step up just a little bit more to keep this thing that we love about Northwest University. So be the friend that you want a friend to be. You want a friend to be a friend to you. Be that friend. Be what that looks like for somebody else and pay that forward.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to first off say thank you to you guys for really being honest and vulnerable to our community and letting them know your perspective on some of the questions we asked. But thank you to our audience. Thank you to the people online just watching, sending those questions in. I know there were so many more that we didn't get to, but I know you guys can agree that those can be used for series to come. Those won't just be not answered, they will be answered. So I just wanted to say thank you to that. But do you guys have any final words you want to tell our Northwest family?
Yes, so as many of you know, I'll be transitioning in the next 2 weeks. So a week from Friday is my last day at Northwest. And so I wanted to give you kind of a short update on what's happening in the future. So I'll let Phil share a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So as Christian just said, he's stepping into a new role. This has been probably going on for about a year. That Christian has been invited to join an incredible church down in Portland, Oregon. John Mark Comer is an incredible leader, pastor, and leading a growing church in Portland, and approached Christian about a year ago. He's been praying about this and going back and forth really in your own spirit. I've been on that journey just a little bit with you and asking God what to do. It comes with, just being completely vulnerable here, it comes with mixed emotions. For me, on the friend side, he's definitely one of my most trusted friends. We've had a 10-year relationship that has just been phenomenal, and we've got stories that we share of a lifetime, it feels like. I feel like I've known him for more than 10 years. And the trust level is, you couldn't be higher. Trust him. So that side of it is hard. The other side of it, though, is for me, when Christian approached me about this opportunity, is rejoicing, because honestly, he came to Northwest 10 years ago as an undergrad student. I remember the first time I actually met you, we were walking through the door of the 6710, the Argue building there, and just what you were so, Christian, you were so excited to be at Northwest, but more than that, you were excited about what God was going to do, your calling for ministry. You were passionate, and from that moment on, you jumped on to the leadership team in the campus ministry. You've been literally pastoring this campus, from a student to a graduate student to a staff member. You've been pastoring this campus for 10 years, and but here you are now. You are at the beginning step of fulfilling that calling that God put on your heart to come to Northwest to prepare you to do something else. And that something else, that season has arrived. That chapter is now here. And there's not there's not a city, I think, that needs your leadership, your skill set more than Portland, Oregon. I mean, I joked earlier when I said this, but I think the sky's the limit. He thinks he's going to go down there to be a pastor. I think he's probably going to end up being the mayor because he has that kind of leadership ability. You know, you can't replace a Christian Dawson. The shoes that need to be filled he has created shoes. He doesn't have that big of feet, and I like your shoes, by the way. You've got it going on today. I like those, but you can't replace a Christian Dawson. His level of integrity, his gift mix, his communication skills, his strategic thought process. I've sat in so many meetings, and he challenged me, and I've learned so much from him. It's irreplaceable, and he leaves such an incredible legacy. His print, the print that he leaves here, fingerprint, it's all over Northwest University. And he's made us a better school by being here as a leader. And so I'm incredibly grateful. But at the same time, so proud. And so the process, over the next little bit, we have a process at Northwest. It's an approval process that includes budget strategy and all of that approval process. Once that process goes into motion and gets approval, we'll start a search for a leader. I don't know how we will ever replace him because we won't, but another leader to come in and help us continue to lead spiritual formation, somewhere probably in November to maybe be in place by January. And again, I don't know what that looks like yet because we really haven't started that process. And in the meantime, I'm going to step in, and I don't pretend we are not alike. We don't even look like. You might wondered how we, anyway. We're not alike. I don't pretend to have the skill set at all, but I'm going to step into that role as an interim position and continue to lead us. And there's so many other wonderful leaders on our campus, the campus ministry, student leadership team, Niharika, and so many others that you know, many students that are in place that you already are aware of, that are continue to lead strong, lead well. We're in great shape. I want you to hear that going forward. Christian's going to come back. He's got an open door to come back and speak, and we're going to make sure he's on the calendar from time to time, and that's going to be great. But so that's kind of what we're going to be doing in the meantime, and then we're going to kind of get this process going, hopefully into January, and see where that leads us. But that's kind of the strategy at this point.
So in the meantime, I'm really, I couldn't, and I mean this, I couldn't be more comfortable, happy, or like thrilled about having Pastor Phil, who was my campus pastor, stepping in as the interim. Really, like, I think in a season like this for our community, what we need is not just someone who's like exciting or cool or has good shoes, but that was weird. But someone who actually has like lived life. And so I knowing Phil and having known him and watched him, Pastor Phil is a man who has high character, high integrity. I've watched his marriage. I've watched the way he treats his kids, his grandkids. I've watched the way he's ministered to our campus for years before I even got here, to have a man who has longevity and character, who's been here for 20 years, being faithful to God, being faithful to this community, faithful to people, a man of high character, like high caliber. I think we need people and leaders like this, people who are steady and who are like peacemakers and kind and wise. And I could not trust Phil more for this position to be the interim campus pastor. And so I'm just honored to have like Phil be the person who's stepping in as it, and having my campus pastor getting to pastor this community for a little bit. And so I'll just tell you, family, like, he's a man I trust deeply, I love deeply, and I know you'll grow to do the same in the next weeks.
Wow. Well, can we give it up for our amazing pastors, everyone?